At the family BBQ, my sister lifted her glass and laughed. "This house is ours now." Mom smiled like it was a rehearsed line. "Just be grateful, Bella." People chuckled. Plates clinked. I nodded, quiet, steady. "Check the deed." The backyard went still. Even the grill hissed softer. I reached into my bag and handed over the envelope. Crystal tore it open, confident, until her voice cracked through the silence. "Eviction." What? They thought the shock started there. But the real betrayal, the one that pushed me to this moment, began months before anyone fired up that grill. My name is Bella Carter, and if you'd seen my family from the outside, you might have thought we were the quiet kind who minded our own business. A small house in Oregon, a mother who baked on weekends, 2 daughters who looked close enough in photos to fool anyone scrolling past. But pictures froze moments. They never captured the shifting weight of who mattered and who didn't. Crystal, my older sister, had always been the gravitational center. Even when we were kids, the house seemed to tilt toward her, wants, her moods, her crises. If she forgot a homework project, Mom stayed up until midnight finishing it. If she overspent her allowance, Mom slipped her extra cash just until next week. The pattern deepened with age. Crystal's job hopping, her credit card problems, her impulsive decisions, everything was explained away with a soft sigh and a look toward me. "Be patient, Bella. She's going through a lot." I learned early that being the stable one didn't bring praise. It brought expectation. I kept my head down, worked hard, paid my bills, and never made waves. I thought that was what grown women did. You carried your own weight. You didn't ask for anything you couldn't earn. You didn't become someone else's burden. But Mom treated my independence like a resource, something available for tapping, stretching, or bending whenever Crystal stumbled again. I still remember the day I handed Mom my old ID and SSN so she could help with tax paperwork. I trusted her the way any daughter would, blindly, instinctively. I didn't know I'd just given away the keys to my future. Back then, I was living in a small apartment near downtown, saving up for a house of my own. Every morning smelled like cheap coffee and warm sunlight leaking through thin curtains. I worked long hours as a software engineer, juggling deadlines, bugs, and meetings. I was proud of my life, quiet, stable, built from scratch. Mom came by occasionally, usually to update me on Crystal's latest emergency or to ask if I could help out a little until things got better. I rarely said no. Boundaries weren't something I'd ever learned to set. Still, the distance was growing. Not physical distance, we all lived in the same city, but emotional space. When we met for Sunday lunches, I noticed how Crystal's eyes scanned my clothes, my car keys, my work bag, as if tallying what I had that she deserved more. Mom noticed too, but instead of stopping it, she leaned in. "Bella, you have so much going for you. Don't be selfish." Selfish. That word sat on me like a stone. I didn't argue. I rarely did. Silence was easier, smoother, less likely to ignite Crystal's temper or Mom's guilt tripping. But silence has a cost, and mine was collecting interest. I thought the roots of our family tension were manageable. Annoying. Hurtful sometimes, but manageable. I had no idea how deep they went or how far they would spread. Not until the day everything broke open. I first realized something was wrong on a Wednesday morning, the kind where nothing feels dramatic at all. I'd taken a late start at work, made oatmeal, opened my laptop, and logged into my lender's portal, expecting a simple approval. My credit was strong, my savings solid, and I'd spent years preparing for this step. Buying a home wasn't just a milestone. It was proof that I'd built a life no one could take credit for but me. So when the screen flashed, "Application denied," my brain rejected it before my eyes could process it. I reread it, then again. I checked the details line by line until the words sharpened into something cold: existing mortgage obligation under applicant's name. A mortgage, I didn't have one. I'd never even applied for one, not before this. I called the lender immediately, pacing the length of my apartment while a representative pulled up my file. Her voice shifted, polite but cautious. "There is an existing mortgage linked to your identity," she said. "Signed 16 months ago." My stomach dropped. "Signed by who?" I asked. "By you, ma'am." I felt something inside me tilt like a floorboard loosening beneath my feet. When she read the address aloud, a house in Beaverton, I gripped the counter just to stay upright. Beaverton, the city where Mom and Crystal lived. For a moment, I couldn't hear anything beyond the rushing sound in my ears. I asked for a copy of the signature page, pretended my voice was steady, then hung up. My hands shook so badly the phone nearly slipped. The document arrived in my email minutes later. I opened it. There it was, my name in looping cursive. Almost perfect, except for one thing. My handwriting didn't curl at the end like that. And I had never signed anything related to a house. Not 16 months ago. Not ever. I called Mom. She answered on the third ring, sounding normal, almost cheerful. "Hey, sweetheart, everything okay?" "There's a mortgage in my name," I said. $500,000. For your house. A long beat of silence. Then her exhale soft and steady like she'd been waiting for this moment. "It's done already, Bella. We're paying the bills. Crystal needed a stable place to start over. You'll understand when you have children." My throat went tight. "Why my name?" "You have good credit," she said simply. "You weren't using it. And we're family. You should be grateful you're able to help." Grateful. That word again. Pressed against my ribs like a bruise. I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I hung up because it was the only thing keeping the heat rising in my chest from boiling over. For hours, I walked around my apartment in silence, trying to assemble the pieces of a picture I didn't want to see. Mom had used the ID I gave her. She had used my SSN, my information, my trust. She'd signed a loan using my identity and bought a house, then lived in it with Crystal as if it were theirs. And the world carried on like nothing had happened. But something had broken, a fault line running straight through the center of my family. And deep down, beneath the hurt and disbelief, something else was forming too. A shift, a pressure, the first flicker of resolve. For the next few days, I moved through my life like someone watching herself from a distance. I went to work. I wrote code. I sat in meetings. But every quiet moment, every pause between tasks, the same truth echoed steady and merciless. They used me. Not accidentally, not out of confusion, but deliberately, calculatingly knowing I wouldn't fight back. That realization hurt more than the forged signature itself. By Friday, the denial had cleared enough for anger to settle in quiet, razor-sharp anger that didn't flare up but carved its way through me. I opened my laptop and started reading. Mortgage law, identity misuse, property ownership, tenant rights. My search history looked like the beginning of a lawsuit, which in some ways it was. That's when I found the part that made me sit perfectly still. In our state, if a loan is taken out under someone's identity, even fraudulently, the legal deed still follows the name on the mortgage, meaning the house was legally mine, not Mom's, not Crystal's, mine. For the first time in days, I felt something close to breath returning to my chest. Still, knowledge wasn't enough. I needed clarity. I scheduled a consultation with an attorney downtown, a calm-voiced man who listened without interrupting as I laid everything out. My SSN, the old ID I'd given Mom, the mortgage documents, the forged signature, the phone call. When I finished, he pressed his fingertips together and nodded slowly. "You're the legal owner," he said. "They're occupying a property that isn't theirs." The room wobbled a little like the air had thickened around me. He slid a printed set of notes across the table. "You don't have to file charges against your mother if you don't want to. Identity misuse among family, it happens more than you think. But you can take back your property. Legally. Quietly." Quietly, I repeated, letting the words settle. He explained the process, written notice, official documentation, a timeline required by the city. Nothing dramatic, nothing violent, just paperwork and boundaries. Two things my family had never respected, but were about to learn the weight of. When I walked out of his office, the sun hit my face like a strange kind of absolution. For the first time since the lender's call, I felt in control. Not vindictive, not raging, just steady. Later that weekend, I drove to the neighborhood in Beaverton where the house sat. I didn't park in the driveway. I stopped at the curb engine, off hands gripping the wheel. Through the front window, I saw Crystal moving around the living room like she owned the place, barefoot, laughing into her phone, dropping a blanket onto a couch I had unknowingly paid for. Mom passed through the hallway behind her, carrying a basket of folded laundry. They looked settled, comfortable. unbothered. A quietness settled over me, cold and clarifying. This wasn't their home. They hadn't earned it. They had taken it. From me. I walked back to my car, opened the passenger seat, and pulled out a thick yellow envelope, the official documents I'd picked up earlier that day. I ran my finger along the edge, feeling the slight ridge of paper inside. This wasn't revenge. Not in the way people imagined it. It was simply the truth returning to its rightful place. And soon, they would have to face it. I didn't show up to the family barbecue to make a scene. I came because silence had served as a shield for too long, and stepping into that backyard meant putting an end to the version of me they'd built someone compliant, bendable, convenient. The July sun hung low when I pulled up to the house, the one bearing a mortgage. I never signed the one they had treated like a reward Crystal was somehow entitled to. Cars lined the street. Music drifted across the lawn, something upbeat, mismatched with the heaviness in my chest. The smell of grilled chicken and charcoal settled into the warm air. Children from our extended family chased each other around the yard, and relatives I hadn't seen in months stood near folding tables stacked with fruit bowls and paper plates. Everything looked festive, easy, effortless, like nothing in my life had been torn apart for this moment to exist. I walked in quietly, no grand entrance, no announcement. I simply followed the stone path to the backyard where the noise swelled into laughter and clinking glasses. Mom saw me first. She brightened, waving her hand with the kind of enthusiasm reserved for guests, not daughters. "There she is," she called out. "Come join us, sweetheart." "Sweetheart?" The words scraped against my ribs. Crystal stood near the patio, leaning into her boyfriend's side, wearing a sundress printed with blue flowers. She looked like she belonged in a lifestyle magazine, the kind that emphasized effortless living. She held a drink in her hand and tapped her nails against the glass as she laughed with a circle of relatives. When she spotted me, her smile widened, but not with warmth, more like amusement. "You made it," she said, raising her cup. "Thought you'd be too busy being, well, responsible." A few people chuckled. I offered a polite nod, ignoring the familiar rush of heat under my skin. Mom looped an arm through mine, steering me toward a long wooden table near the grill. "Grab a plate," she urged. "There's plenty of food." Crystal put this whole thing together. Of course she did. With my house, my loan, my credit. I murmured something neutral and reached for a cup of water instead. As the afternoon unfolded, relatives circulated around, sharing stories, catching up, joking. I watched Crystal drift through the crowd like she was hosting a grand event. She gave tours of the house, pointing out her decor, her choices, her renovation plans. Every time she said my house, something in me pulled tighter like a cord, winding down to its last inch. But I waited, patient, calm. Every step of this day had been mapped out long before I arrived. It was nearly sunset when Crystal called everyone to the patio. "Hey, gather around," she shouted, lifting her cup. "I want to make a toast." The murmur of conversation settled. Chairs scraped. People formed a loose semicircle around her. I stood off to the side, close enough to hear, far enough to observe. Crystal lifted her glass, her bracelet catching the fading sunlight. "I just want to say how grateful I am," she began, smiling broadly. "This house has changed everything for me. For us." Her boyfriend squeezed her shoulder. Mom beamed proudly from beside the grill. "And honestly," Crystal continued, laughter bubbling up as she glanced at me, "it feels amazing to finally have a place that's ours. This house is ours now." Several relatives clapped. My grip tightened around the envelope inside my bag. Then Mom added with a soft, dismissive smile that slipped like oil across the moment, "Just be grateful, Bella." Not angry, not mocking, just dismissing me. As though I should feel honored to have my future repurposed for someone else's comfort. The crowd watched me now, waiting, expecting the quiet girl who always took the hit, the one who swallowed discomfort for the sake of harmony. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't match their theatrics. I simply nodded. The motion was small, almost imperceptible, but inside everything aligned with a cold final click. "Check the deed," I said. It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. The backyard froze. Laughter died mid-breath. Someone lowered a forkful of potato salad without realizing it. Even the kids paused at the edges of the lawn, sensing the shift. Mom blinked slowly. "What did you just say?" I set my drink down and slid the yellow envelope from my bag. The paper made a faint crinkle more powerful than any shout could have been. Crystal laughed again, but this time it wavered. "What's that supposed to mean?" I stepped forward and placed the envelope on the table. "If this house is ours," I said, "then we shouldn't have any problem looking at the deed." Her smile faltered. Mom reached for the envelope, first fingers trembling before she caught herself. "Bella, this isn't the place." Crystal snatched it instead. "Fine," she snapped, ripping the seal with a flourish. "Let's clear up your confusion." She pulled out the documents pages of legal text signatures and the official notice I had filed earlier that week. Her eyes moved quickly, then slowed, then widened. What is this?" Her voice cracked. I remained still, feeling the weight of silence thicken around us. Relatives leaned in, whispers rippled. Crystal's boyfriend shifted uncomfortably beside her. Mom stepped closer, peering over Crystal's shoulder. Her face drained of color. "Eviction," Crystal whispered, as if saying the word would soften it. But when she found the line stating their timeline to vacate, her voice pitched into a high, panicked scream. "Eviction. What?" The scream shattered whatever illusion of unity the BBQ had been trying to project. Several guests stepped back. A few others exchanged uneasy glances. Mom grabbed the papers from Crystal's hands, scanning them as if searching for a loophole that didn't exist. "You can't do this," she whispered, shaking her head. "Bella, you can't. We're family." Family. The word came out as an accusation, not a bond. "You used my identity," I said quietly. "You signed my name. You bought this house with a loan tied to my future. And neither of you told me." Crystal's breath came in sharp bursts. "We were paying the bills," she insisted, voice breaking. "Everyone helps family. You just—" She couldn't finish. "This isn't help," I replied. "This is fraud. And the only reason I'm not pressing charges is because I decided to end this quietly, legally, fairly." Mom clutched the notice, her voice trembling. "Where are we supposed to go?" I met her eyes I had searched for understanding so many times. "The same place I went when I needed stability," I said. "Somewhere you create for yourselves." A distant dog barked. A guest cleared their throat. The grill hissed its final flare before dying down. Crystal sank into a chair, shaking. Her boyfriend tried to comfort her, but she pushed him away, still flipping through pages as if willing them to change. Mom looked at me. Her face caught between disbelief and grief. "You blindsided us. You blindsided me 16 months ago," I said. "I'm just returning the truth to its rightful place." The sun dipped fully behind the fence, throwing the yard into a dusky glow. Relatives drifted away, murmuring excuses, unsure which side to stand on. I didn't stay longer than I needed to. I didn't savor the moment or search for apology. I turned, walked down the stone path, and stepped back into the cool evening air beyond the yard. Behind me, voices rose. Panic, anger, denial. But none of it reached me the way it used to. Justice wasn't loud. It was steady, and I had finally learned how to hold it. The days after the barbecue felt strangely quiet, as if the world had shifted a few inches, and I was still learning the new balance. I didn't check in on Mom or Crystal. I didn't track the timeline. The process was already in motion, official, documented, and no longer mine to emotionally carry. All I could do was let the consequences unfold the way they were meant to. Within a week, I received confirmation that the notice had been acknowledged. 2 weeks later, I drove past the house on my way to pick up groceries. Their cars were still there, the curtains drawn tight, but the place looked different, shrunk somehow. Less like a home and more like a reminder of everything I had allowed for too long. I didn't slow down. By the 3rd week, the house was empty. The driveway clean, the windows bare. A real estate sign stood in the yard, bright white against the grass. I parked for the first time since everything broke open and walked toward the porch. No memories here were truly mine, but for the first time, the space felt honest. No secrets, no manipulation, no entitlement lingering in the air. Selling it was easier than I expected. The funds cleared quickly. I paid off the mortgage, closed the account, and used the remainder as the down payment for a small apartment on the other side of the city. It wasn't grand or flashy, but it was mine, earned, not stolen. On my first night there, I stood by the window with a cup of tea watching the lights of the city flicker against the glass. For the first time in months, my shoulders dropped, my breath deepened, and the quiet didn't feel like fear. It felt like freedom. In the weeks that followed, I didn't hear from Mom or Crystal. Maybe they were angry, maybe ashamed, maybe still insisting they were the victims. But their silence didn't sting the way it once did. I had reclaimed something larger than a house I had reclaimed myself. And if you've ever had to pull yourself out of a family's shadow, you know that kind of victory is quiet, but life-changing. If this story resonates with you, share your experience below. And don't forget to subscribe for more true family stories.